Hello, my name is PeterDengate Thrush, and I was on the APTLD board from 2000 until 2007. My APTLD story begins in February of 1998 with the publication of the US government's Green Paper. That's really the start of my involvement with internet governance. I was then a barrister practicing in IP law in Wellington. I had given legal advice to Internet New Zealand on its structure and governance and its domain name policy. News about possible changes to the governance of the internet in the USA were interesting, but seemed very remote. As that Green Paper reports, on the 1st of July 1997, President Clinton had directed the Secretary of Commerce to privatise, increase competition in, and promote international participation in the domain name system. So on the 2nd of July 1998, the US government published a request for comments, resulting in some 1,500 pages of comments from 430 submitters. The Green Paper collated those comments and submissions and made some preliminary findings, the most important of which was that the US government should end its role in the naming and numbering systems of the internet, but should do so in a way that promoted stability. There should be competition, and a new corporation should be privately run via bottom-up coordination. And it's interesting to see a quote from that Green Paper. The US government would gradually transfer existing IANA functions, the root system, and the appropriate databases to this new not-for-profit corporation. This transition would commence as soon as possible, with operational responsibility moved to the new entity by September the 30th, 1998. Well, in July 98, after reviewing responses to the Green Paper, the US government released the White Paper, which gave more detail of the new corporation to be set up to coordinate the internet's crucial infrastructural resources. So APTLD was formed during this time of intense internet governance changes. In my presentation, I'm going to talk about APTLD against the backdrop of these developments, especially the formation and development of ICANN, in which APTLD played a prominent role. The new body was to be globally geodiverse, operate transparency and with accountability to its stakeholders, and to be largely government-free. This prescription eventually led to the incorporation in California of ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. And as many of you know, I ended up helping to build that body, being elected to the board of ICANN and serving for 4 years as its chairman. The White Paper had only 2 references to CCTLDs, and both were wrong. And I'm going to quote now from the White Paper: CCTLDs are administered by their corresponding governments or by private entities with the appropriate national government's acquiescence. And the second quote: of course, national governments now have and will continue to have authority to manage or establish policy for their own CCTLDs. Now, many CCTLDs were not administered by the corresponding governments, and many had worked hard to limit their government's authority to make policy. And a good example of this last point was New Zealand, the .NZ TLD. Many governments still had no idea of the role the internet was to play in their countries, their commercial, their social activities over the next decade, and in some cases were unaware of the identity and the role of the CCTLD manager. Some were run from outside the relevant country, some were for profit, others not for profit, and some were yet to get even started. Now, we at Internet NZ and other CCTLD managers were interested in this process and somewhat concerned that any new arrangement should take into account our responsibilities under RFC 1591 to the, quote, local internet community, unquote. Now, some managers participated in the International Forum on the White Paper, a loose coalition of interested parties who arranged a set of meetings around the globe for members of the various internet agencies to come together and discuss the White Paper. Meetings were held in Virginia, USA, Geneva, Switzerland, Singapore, and Buenos Aires in Argentina. Now, Asia-Pacific people, internet people, were attending the forum meeting in Geneva on the 24th of July 98. And they decided to hold one of the earliest meetings towards creating what became APTLD. To be complete, I must say, there had been talks about forming such a body on earlier occasions, including a Birds of a Feather meeting at Manila Apricot in February 98, and at the INET meeting in Kuala Lumpur in June 97. An equivalent body, then called RIPE Centre, had been formed by the Euro CCTLDs in July of 97. So it gave us some idea about what might be done. So the minutes of the meeting held in Geneva on 21 July 1998 are the record of a first formal deliberate attempt to create a body for the Asia Pacific. It was then called the APTLD, and many of the names of those present will be familiar to you all. It was chaired by the recently deceased and much missed Toru Takahashi. Not all of the names of those present from the APCCTLDs were recorded, but we know Maruyama and Yumi Ohashi from JP Nick, Patrick O'Brien from .NZ, Kilnan Chong from Korea, Tin Tan Wee and Agnes Lee from Singapore, Clive Flory from Australia, Hualan Chan from China, Chei Hu Cheng from Hong Kong, Bill Semich from .NU, and Kuo Wei from Taiwan were all there. Now, a second meeting was held in Singapore on the 12th of August 98, and in addition to the names I've just called out, we saw representatives from the CCTLDs of Cambodia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, and Thailand attending this meeting. APTLD was starting to take shape. And at this meeting, the formal name APTLD was adopted. Kilnam Chom was elected interim chair with 5 vice chairs dedicated to developing positions for the new body on administration, finance, education, projects and developing country support. Interestingly, in view of New Zealand's long support of APTLD, 2 of those 5 were Kiwis, Jim Higgins and Patrick O'Brien. By the time of the next meeting on the 1st of March 1999, also in Singapore, there was an awful lot going on. ICANN had been formed and was having its first full meeting in Singapore a few days later on March the 2nd. ICANN had already asked WIPO to conduct a project on developing rules dealing with trademarks and domain name collision and piracy. WIPO had run around the world meetings on a topic in a similar way to the International White Paper Forum meetings. Many CCTLDs had participated, New Zealand among them. I had helped write the New Zealand position on the WIPO process and by then had participated in the Boston Working Group, a meeting in September in '98, making comments on the then draft bylaws of what became ICANN. I was in Singapore for the ICANN meeting and was invited to attend the 3rd APTLD meeting by Jim Higgins and did so. So that was my first APTLD meeting, 24.5 years ago. That meeting progressed many constitutional issues towards getting APTLD established, including setting policy on membership, on subscriptions, and it set up 7 committees to take the organisation forward. The ICANN meeting itself was important as the new board announced the formation of the DNSO, the Domain Name Support Organisation, which was intended to be the home in ICANN for these CCTLDs. Now, our first task was to build each of these constituencies of the DNSO, and I was involved with setting up both the intellectual property constituency and the CCTLD one. ICANN meetings in Berlin in May, Santiago in August, and Los Angeles in November of '99 meant that it was an extremely busy year. At the end of '99, I was elected president of Internet NZ. I'd been their legal advisor since 1994 and was not successful in getting elected as an inaugural member of the ICANN board. That meant I was able to spend more time helping set up APTLD. APTLD meetings continued to be mostly held in conjunction with ICANN meetings to save travel costs. I was elected to the board of APTLD at the Yokohama meeting in July 2000 as senior vice chair. At that meeting, Professor Chan took over as chair from Professor Chon, and that was the first formal meeting of a properly elected APTLD board. One important topic was building a secretariat. An RFP was prepared. By the next meeting in Bangkok in October of 2000, responses to the RFC were considered and TW Nick was awarded the role of unpaid secretariat. They did a fine job for several years and helped APTLD get firmly established. It was also notable that for many productive years, APTLD had a chair from China and a secretariat from Taiwan, with never any sign of an issue arising from their origins. Technical cooperation on the internet recognised no political boundaries. We were all still very concerned about ICANN and our rights and responsibilities under RFC 1591. ICANN's DNSO was spending 99% of its time on GTLD matters. These were of great importance in the mission of ICANN, but mattered less to CCTLD managers. ICANN had adopted the Uniform Dispute Resolution Policy in November '99, and a lot of work on setting up a competitive registrar market was going on. ICANN had taken over and amended the contract to run .com. And at the Cairo meeting in March of 2000, ICANN rolled out a similar contract it wanted the CCTLDs to sign. It was a bad contract for CCTLDs, similar to the .com contract, and it made the CCTLDs franchisees of ICANN and subject to US law. Everyone refused to sign, except Australia. I was elected to an informal admin committee of the Worldwide Alliance of CCTLDs, working on defending our role under RFC 1591. Abhishek Chulya was the secretary. As a global group, we had elected 3 representatives of the Names Council running the DNSO, but they had no power to implement anything, and the DNSO was fully engaged with GTLD matters. By the time of the Los Angeles meeting in November 2000, I had realised that the CCTLD community was not being served by the DNSO structure and needed its own support organisation. I presented this idea, and I still have the original flip charts, to the CCTLD meeting, and it received support from most. Every CCTLD manager would be eligible to join. Members were those who signed up. The world was divided into 5 regions represented by Centre, APTLD, LACTLD, North America, and APTLD, sending 3 reps each to a CCSO council. We worked on this idea for the next few ICANN meetings, having special meetings with the ICANN CEO in Honolulu and Geneva in February of 2001, warning ICANN at the Melbourne meeting in March 2001, and formally voting to withdraw from the DNSO at the next meeting in Stockholm in June of 2001. And from then on, we began working on forming a CCSO. The CCTLD group was the largest single group in ICANN and the most diverse. Our participation gave ICANN its international legitimacy. Without the CCTLDs, ICANN would be just the GTLD regulator. APTLD members represented a large block of CCTLD managers and represented a huge proportion of the people on the planet. We were organised and our voice counted. The CCSO idea was further promoted at the Montevideo meeting in September 2001, and I spent time negotiating with other members of the DNSO and the GAC for support. ICANN was still trying to get us to sign their contract, including blackmailing CCTLDs by refusing to make routine changes at the IANA databases unless the contract was signed. Serious conversations about alternate routes were begun. By the time of the Ghana meeting in March 2002, the new CEO, Stuart Lin, had proposed a radical restructuring of ICANN. Fortunately, it included a CCTLD support organisation. Our determination and persistence had paid off. At subsequent meetings in Bucharest, which was June 2002, and Shanghai of October 2002, APTLD endorsed the CCSO, and we worked on the implementation and bylaw changes needed. A major sticking point was the European CCTLDs. By Bucharest, Ramesh Kumar Nadaraja from Malaysia had taken over as chair of APTLD. Bids were sought for the location of incorporation of APTLD, and Malaysia was selected. Most of 2002 was consumed by discussion of ICANN reform. In September 2002, ICANN formed an assistance group of hand-picked help, most notably omitting me, and starting work on bylaws. At the Montreal meeting in June of 2003, I was called in to help negotiate the final sticking point, the power of ICANN to control the CCTLDs, and won the concession that prevails today. It was to be left to the CCTLDs to establish the rules for delegation and redelegation of CCTLDs, and managers could join the CCNSO without a contract with ICANN. Most of 2003 was also consumed by ICANN issues. Who could make policy for CCTLDs? Was a CCNSO resolution binding or merely advisory on the board? What should the CCTLDs contribute financially to ICANN, etc.? At APTLD, we did update our constitution. TWNIC produced a new and much better website. We formed a tech committee and started outreach to the other regional TLD associations. UMI continued great work on member outreach, and we were delighted when in June of 2003, Professor Hualin Chan was appointed by the nominating committee to the ICANN board. APTLD meetings were held in Kuala Lumpur, Busan, Carthage, and Wellington. Ramesh stepped down at the end of September 2003, and I was elected interim chair until the next AGM. By the Wellington meeting, we were looking at a strategic plan and some longer-term planning. ICANN formed a CCNSO launching group, and the AP reps for that were me, Hero Hotter, and Chris Despain. It took until the Cape Town meeting in December of 2004 to fully launch the CCNSO and to elect 2 CTLD directors to the ICANN board. I was elected, along with Demi Getchko from Brazil. In 2004, APTLD started having more online meetings. We looked at the APTLD Secretariat providing secretarial support for the new CCNSO and to making nominations for the AP Council seats. I announced I was not standing for Council, but would stand for the board. Chris Despain said he would stand for the Council. Meetings were held in Kuala Lumpur and Perth, at which we developed closer formal relations with Centre, and New Zealand took over the Secretariat. We began to look at the option of a full-time paid General Manager or CEO. Meetings in 2005 were in Kyoto, Singapore and Amman, Jordan. We spent time becoming a regional organisation under the new CCNSO structure and spent time reviewing CCTLD developments at ICANN. Concerns were also building about the WSIS. I was privileged to be part of the New Zealand team hosting an ICANN meeting in Wellington in early 2006. At that meeting, APTLD appointed Don Hollander as its first paid General Manager. Other meetings were held in Hong Kong and Bangkok. APTLD continued to lead on IDN implementation, and members provided assistance to ICANN's new efforts in this area. I stepped down from chairing APTLD at its 2007 AGM, and later in 2007, I was elected chairman of the board of ICANN. I continued as ICANN chair to have productive dealings with APTLD, who took the lead on issues such as multilingual domain names. So I hope in this talk I've explained what a major role APTLD and its members have contributed to internet governance as a whole, and particularly the support and growth of ICANN. We've come a long way from the Green Paper. I'm very grateful to Internet New Zealand for its support of me and of the APTLD over these busy years. I think APTLD can be proud of its work over 25 years, and I wish it every success in the 25 years ahead. Thank you.